Cowboy saw bruises on her arms, told her, "Pack your things, you're mine now." The small town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's name. Dusty roads stretched between wooden houses, and the wind carried the smell of hay and horses through the streets. Life in Willow Creek was simple and quiet, but for some, that quiet could feel heavy, almost suffocating. For one young woman named Clara, it felt that way most days. She moved through the town as if she were invisible, keeping her head down and her hands hidden. The soft fabric of her long sleeves concealed the marks she did not want anyone to see, bruises on her arms that told a story she wished no one knew. Clara lived in a small, weathered house on the edge of town. The paint had chipped years ago, and the wooden porch creaked underfoot, but it was her home, her small space of safety. She spent her days working quietly at the town's general store, stocking shelves, sweeping floors, and helping customers with polite, measured words. She had learned long ago that people rarely asked questions they did not already know the answer to, and she had grown skilled at keeping her own secrets. The townspeople liked Clara well enough, but no one really knew her. They saw her gentle smile, her quiet manners, and assumed she was shy. They did not see the nights she spent awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until dawn. They did not see the way her hands shook when she thought no one was looking, or the way her eyes darkened with memories she could not forget. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the town in shades of gold, Clara walked to the market to pick up a few groceries. She kept her head down, clutching her basket tightly. She moved with careful steps, trying not to draw attention, but the wind caught her hair and brushed it across her face. A man watched her from across the street. He was a cowboy, known by the townspeople as Luke. Luke was tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent under the sun. His hat shaded his eyes, but his gaze was sharp and observant. He had a reputation for being quiet, maybe even a little distant, but anyone who spent time with him knew he had a strong sense of fairness and a gentle side that he reserved for those who needed it most. Luke noticed Clara immediately. There was something about her, a quiet strength mixed with fragility, that made him stop and watch. As she reached for a loaf of bread on the top shelf, he caught sight of her arms peeking out from her sleeves. There, faint but unmistakable, were the marks of someone who had been hurt. His stomach tightened, not with anger but with concern. He had seen pain before, and he recognized it instantly. For a moment he debated whether to approach her. He knew better than to intrude, but something inside him urged him to act. He wanted to offer help, even if she didn't ask for it. Clara, for her part, was unaware of the eyes on her. She was careful with every movement, scanning the shelves, counting the coins in her pocket, pretending everything was normal. But the weight she carried was heavy, and it made her movements small, careful, almost cautious of the air around her. Luke finally stepped forward, making his way to the counter where she was standing. He smiled gently, a kind of smile that was steady and reassuring. "Good evening," he said. His voice was low and calm, and it carried an ease that made Clara glance up. She almost dropped the loaf of bread she was holding. "Evening," she replied softly, her eyes darting away almost immediately. She was not used to strangers speaking to her in such a way, especially not strangers who seemed to notice things they should not. Luke reached for a basket on the counter and picked up a few items, then glanced at her again. "You look like you've had a long day," he said casually, careful not to sound accusing or overly familiar. "It's a tough time of year." Clara nodded, murmuring a small polite agreement. She was not ready to share her story with anyone, but there was something in Luke's tone that made her hesitate before retreating into her usual quietness. There was no judgment there, no hurry to pry. Just a simple acknowledgement of the weight she carried. As they continued through the market, Luke noticed her hands shaking slightly as she lifted a jar of preserves. He didn't comment, didn't stare, but he remembered. Later, as they reached the door, he placed a small, folded note on the counter, pretending it had fallen from somewhere. Clara glanced down and her heart skipped a beat. The note was blank except for a simple line. "You are not alone." She looked around, searching for him, but he was already gone, walking back toward his horse with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the world was not always fair, but could still be made better. Clara felt a strange warmth in her chest, a flicker of hope she had not felt in a long time. She picked up the note carefully, folding it and tucking it into her pocket as she walked home. That evening, Clara sat on her creaking porch, the note pressed against her palm. The sun had set, and the stars began to appear, faint but steady in the darkening sky. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. She thought about Luke, the cowboy with kind eyes and careful words, and wondered why someone like him would care. She did not yet know the answer, but for the first time, she felt the stirrings of trust. Inside her small house, she moved quietly, preparing her simple dinner, her thoughts returning again and again to the brief encounter. She wondered if he would remember her tomorrow, if he would notice her again, and though she tried to push the thought aside, a small, daring hope grew inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she did not have to face her struggles alone anymore. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she traced the faint marks on her arms, thinking about what her life had been until now. She thought about the fear that had kept her silent, the isolation that had made the days blend together, and the courage it would take to step beyond the walls she had built around herself. And though sleep came slowly, it brought with it the first sense of possibility in a long while, a whisper that change might one day be within her reach. Outside, Luke rode past her house, the wind rustling his hat and the soft sound of hooves on the dirt road marking the end of another day. He did not know yet if Clara would accept help, or if she would trust him when the time came. But he knew one thing for certain. Some people carried burdens they could not show, and sometimes all it took was one small gesture to start changing a life. In that quiet town, under the fading light of the day, two lives had brushed against each other. One carried hidden pain, the other quiet strength and determination. And though neither knew it yet, the moment they met would begin a journey that neither would forget. A journey of trust, healing, and the courage to take the first step toward freedom. The days after Clara's brief encounter with Luke passed slowly, but her thoughts were never far from him. She returned to her usual routines, going to the market, helping at the general store, and keeping her life as quiet and small as possible. Yet in every quiet moment she felt the echo of his words, the flicker of his kindness. "You are not alone," the note had said. Those simple words had lodged themselves in her mind, growing into something she had almost forgotten she could feel. Hope. Clara's life before Luke had been a careful balance of routine and secrecy. She woke early each morning, swept the floors, and prepared a small breakfast before stepping out into the town. She avoided large crowds, kept her voice low, and walked with her eyes often downcast. The bruises on her arms were a daily reminder of the struggles she had endured, though she hid them from the world with long sleeves and careful movements. Fear had taught her to be invisible, and invisibility had become a shield she rarely let down. Yet now, with Luke's gesture fresh in her mind, Clara found herself thinking about what it might mean to trust someone, even in a small way. She wondered if she could let someone see her without judgment, someone who might actually want to help. It was a terrifying thought, but also a strange relief, as if a tiny door had opened in her heart that she had not noticed before. Meanwhile, Luke did not disappear from her life entirely. Over the next few days, he would pass her on the streets of Willow Creek, tipping his hat politely, offering a quiet greeting. He never pressed for conversation, never asked questions that might frighten her. Instead, he moved through the town with the steady, calm presence of someone who noticed the small details others missed. He left subtle signs of care, sometimes a loaf of bread left at the general store for her, a bottle of water on her porch, a small firewood stack so she would not struggle to heat her house in the evenings. Clara noticed these gestures, though she did not see who had done them at first. Each act of kindness made her heart beat a little faster. She began to realize that someone genuinely cared about her well-being without expecting anything in return. For someone who had spent so long alone, that realization was both comforting and frightening. She was not used to kindness that demanded nothing, and yet it slowly began to thaw the walls she had built around herself. Her days began to shift in subtle ways. She lingered longer at the market, pretending to look at the fruits and vegetables while secretly hoping to see Luke's familiar figure. She smiled at neighbors she had once avoided, testing the boundaries of trust. She even allowed herself small moments of laughter when a child tripped over a loose board or a dog chased its tail in the dusty street. These were simple things, but to Clara, They felt like sparks of a life she thought she had lost. Despite these small changes, Clara's fears remained. Each night when she returned to her quiet house on the edge of town, the bruises on her arms reminded her of what she had endured. They whispered that the world could still be cruel, that kindness could be fleeting, and that trust could be dangerous. But then she would recall the soft strength in Luke's eyes, the calmness of his voice, the quiet way he had respected her boundaries. Slowly, she began to understand that not everyone sought to hurt her, and that safety might be possible if she allowed herself to believe it. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned a soft orange, Clara found herself walking toward the general store after finishing her chores. She carried a basket of vegetables for her small kitchen garden, thinking about what she might prepare for dinner. That was when she saw him, Luke, leaning against the post of a nearby barn. His hat tilted slightly, eyes scanning the horizon. The sight made her heart race, but she did not turn away. He nodded to her in greeting, a simple gesture, and she felt a flutter of courage she had not felt before. Gathering her resolve, she approached him slowly, unsure of what to say.
"Hello,"
she whispered, her voice shaking slightly.
"Evening, Clara."
Luke replied, his voice calm and steady. "I was wondering how you've been." There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine concern. The simplicity of his words made her feel seen, as if someone had finally noticed not just the surface of her life, but the struggles beneath it. They walked together, slowly, past the dusty streets and into the open fields on the edge of town. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh hay. For a moment, neither spoke, simply enjoying the quiet and the feeling of not being alone. It was a small, gentle connection, but to Clara, it felt monumental. Finally, she found the courage to speak.
I don't usually talk to people," she admitted, her voice soft. "It's hard
to trust." Luke nodded. "I know," he said simply. "I understand more than you think. Sometimes the hardest step is letting someone see you when you feel weak, but taking that step can also be the start of something better." Clara listened, absorbing the meaning of his words. She felt a tiny shift within her, a recognition that maybe she didn't have to carry everything alone. The thought was both frightening and relieving, like standing on the edge of a river, unsure whether to jump, but knowing the water might hold safety. Over the next few days, their interactions became more frequent, though always subtle. Luke would help her with chores without asking, offering small advice when asked, and quietly keeping an eye on her well-being. Clara began to notice the difference it made to have someone who respected her boundaries, someone whose presence brought calm rather than fear. She began to leave her house a little earlier, work a little longer at the store, and even smile at the townspeople she had once ignored. The world felt a little less heavy, the days a little brighter. Yet, trust was not something that grew overnight. Clara had to navigate moments of fear and doubt. There were days when she recoiled from kindness, convinced it would lead to disappointment or hurt. There were nights when she lay awake, remembering the pain she had endured, wondering if she was truly ready to allow herself to be helped. But Luke never pushed. He simply remained a steady presence, a quiet reminder that someone cared and that help could come without conditions. One afternoon, as Clara was tending to her small garden, she noticed a pile of firewood neatly stacked at the side of her house. She looked around, and there was Luke, tipping his hat in a gentle greeting. She felt a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, feeling her chest swell with something she had almost forgotten: trust. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to. Sometimes small things make the biggest difference." He paused, studying her face carefully. "And you deserve those small things, Clara. You deserve to feel safe and cared for." Those words lingered in her mind long after he had left. She realized that his actions were not about control or pity or expectations. They were about genuine care, the kind of care she had never experienced before. Slowly, she began to allow herself to hope, to imagine a life where she could be safe, where she could be seen without fear. As the days passed, Clara started to notice changes within herself. She moved with more confidence, spoke with more clarity, and even allowed herself moments of laughter with the few friends she had in town. The fear that had defined her life was still present, but it no longer held the same power over her. Each act of kindness from Luke, each quiet word, each simple gesture of support chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, as the sun set in a brilliant display of gold and pink, Clara found herself walking alongside Luke once more. They did not speak much, simply walking through the fields, the wind carrying the scent of wildflowers and the promise of something new. She felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation, knowing that change was coming and that the choice to step into it rested with her. It was in that quiet moment, with the sky painted in shades of hope, that Clara began to understand something important. Healing was not about forgetting the past, nor about pretending pain did not exist. Healing was about taking small steps toward trust, allowing kindness to enter her life, and finding courage she did not know she still had. Luke had not fixed her problems, nor had he taken away the scars she bore. But he had shown her something she had almost forgotten. She was not alone, and she had the right to a life free from fear. And though the path ahead was uncertain, Clara felt for the first time in a long while a sense of quiet determination. She knew that the journey would be difficult, that moments of doubt and fear would come, but she also knew that she had found an ally, a steady presence who would walk beside her as she took the steps towards safety and freedom. For the first time in years, she believed that a life of hope, trust, and new beginnings was possible. Clara had begun to notice a subtle shift in herself. She no longer flinched at every shadow or jumped at sudden noises. She could walk through the town with a little more confidence, smile at the neighbors, and even enjoy a few quiet moments at the market without constant anxiety. It was not that her fears had disappeared. They never would entirely, but for the first time in years they no longer controlled her life. Luke's presence had become a steady rhythm in her days. He did not overwhelm her with attention or demands. Instead, he quietly observed, helped when needed, and left enough space for her to grow at her own pace. He had become someone she could rely on, a person who showed her that kindness did not have strings attached, and slowly, ever so slowly, Clara began to trust him. One afternoon, the town was unusually busy. Merchants called out their wares, children ran through the dusty streets laughing, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. Clara had been helping at the general store, arranging jars of preserves and sweeping the wooden floorboards, when she noticed a crowd forming near the center of town. Curiosity nudged her forward, and she stepped outside to see what was happening. A traveling performer had arrived, a man with colorful clothing, a small troupe of musicians, and a playful dog that performed tricks. People gathered around, clapping and laughing, their attention captured by the show. Clara watched from a distance, her heart lifting slightly at the sight of joy and celebration. She almost smiled openly when she felt Luke's presence at her side. "Enjoying the show?" he asked, his voice calm, steady, and familiar. Yes, she replied softly. "It's nice to see people happy." Luke nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Sometimes it's the little things that remind us life can be good," he said. "Even when things feel heavy, moments like this can make a difference." Clara nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that Luke had not only shown her that she could trust someone, but also that she could allow herself to experience happiness again. It was a strange, liberating feeling, one that she had not thought possible for a long time. As the days passed, Clara found herself thinking more and more about the possibility of change. She began to imagine what her life could be like if she could leave behind the fears and pain that had defined her for so long. She pictured herself walking through the fields without anxiety, laughing with friends, and living in a home that felt truly safe. The thought was both exciting and terrifying, but for the first time she felt a spark of courage that urged her forward. One evening, as the sky turned a soft lavender with the setting sun, Luke arrived at her house. He did not knock. She had learned that his quiet approach meant he respected her space. Instead, he waited patiently on the porch, tipping his hat in greeting. Clara felt her heart beat faster, a mixture of anticipation and fear swirling within her.
"Clara," he said softly, "I've been thinking. You've come so far, and I can see the strength you have inside."
But I also know that some places can hold people back, and I want to help you step into a life where you can be free.
Her breath caught at his words.
Freedom! The word felt foreign on her tongue, yet it stirred something deep within her. She had dreamed of it quietly for years, but never dared to believe it could be real. I don't know, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know it is, Luke replied gently, but staying where fear has always lived is scarier in the long run. You don't have to face it alone. I'll be with you. Clara's mind raced. She had spent so long hiding, so long feeling trapped. And now here was someone offering a hand, not to control her, but to guide her toward safety. She looked down at her hands, at the faint scars that told stories she had tried to forget. She had a choice: stay where she felt safe but limited, or step into the unknown with someone who truly cared.
Her gaze met Luke's, steady and calm.
There was no rush, no expectation, only sincerity and concern. She felt a strange warmth, a sense of trust she had never allowed herself to feel before. Slowly, deliberately, she nodded. Okay, she said softly. I'll try. Luke's face softened into a reassuring smile. Good, he said. That's all I ask, one step at a time. That night, Clara packed her few belongings carefully. She chose only what she needed: a few clothes, some essentials, and a small box of keepsakes that reminded her of better times. Each item she placed into her bag felt like a step toward freedom, a declaration that she was ready to leave fear behind. She paused often, taking deep breaths, allowing herself to feel the courage growing within her. As she finished packing, Luke appeared once more. Ready? He asked quietly. Clara nodded, her heart pounding. Yes, she whispered. Together, they left the small house on the edge of town. The streets were quiet, the stars beginning to appear overhead. Clara felt a mix of fear and anticipation, but also a sense of relief she had never known. For the first time in years, she was leaving behind a place that had held her back, stepping toward a future she could choose. They walked through the fields, the wind brushing against their faces, carrying the scents of earth and wildflowers. Clara's steps were slow at first, but with each stride she felt the weight of her past lightened. Luke walked beside her, silent but steady, a reassuring presence that gave her strength. Along the way, they talked quietly. Luke shared stories of his life on the open plains, of long days under the sun and quiet nights by the campfire. Clara listened, her laughter returning in small bursts, the sound surprising even to her. She found herself opening up about her past in small ways, sharing memories and fears she had kept buried for years. Luke listened without judgment, without interruption, offering only encouragement and understanding. As the hours passed, they reached a small clearing near a stream. The moon reflected on the water, casting a gentle glow across the landscape. Clara sat down on a smooth rock, feeling the cool night air against her face. She looked at Luke, who had removed his hat and was studying the sky. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know if I could have done this without you." Luke smiled, a gentle, reassuring expression.
You did this, he said firmly.
I only walked beside you. The courage was always yours. Clara felt a lump in her throat. She realized that he was right. This journey, this step toward freedom, was hers. She had made the choice to leave behind fear, to trust again, and to embrace the possibility of a better life. Luke had simply shown her that she could. They stayed by the stream for a while, listening to the gentle flow of water and the sounds of the night. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future without constant fear, without hiding, without the burden of her past dictating every moment. She felt hope blooming quietly within her, fragile but real. As dawn approached, Clara and Luke continued their journey. The path ahead was uncertain, but Clara no longer felt the same fear she had carried for so long. Each step forward was a small victory, a declaration that she would no longer be defined by her past. With Luke by her side, she felt the strength to face whatever challenges awaited, knowing she was not alone. By the time the sun rose, painting the fields with golden light, Clara had taken her first true steps toward a new life. She had left behind the place that had held her in fear, embraced the support of someone who truly cared, and discovered a courage she had almost forgotten she possessed. And as she looked at the horizon, she knew one thing for certain: her journey was only beginning. But she was ready. The sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the world in shades of gold and soft pink. Clara and Luke walked side by side along a narrow dirt path, the early morning air crisp and cool. For the first time in years, Clara felt a sense of calm that was not tinged with fear. The long journey she had begun the day before had already changed something deep inside her. The weight she had carried for so long, the worry, the fear, the loneliness, was lifting, replaced by a quiet determination and a growing hope for the future. They had walked through fields dotted with wildflowers and past small streams where water ran clear and cool.
The journey was not just about leaving behind the town that had held her in fear. It was about stepping into a life where she could make her own choices, where kindness and trust could be part of her everyday world.
Each step felt like a small victory, and she felt it in her chest, a gentle, steady warmth that told her she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Luke had been walking quietly beside her most of the morning, letting her set the pace and the direction. He spoke only when necessary, offering practical guidance or encouragement, but mostly, he let his presence speak. Clara found comfort in this. She did not have to explain herself, defend her past, or prove her courage. He simply walked beside her, a steady support she could rely on without fear. As they paused at a small hilltop to rest, Clara took a deep breath and looked out over the horizon. From this height, the world seemed vast and full of possibility. The wind brushed her hair against her face, and she felt the first stirrings of freedom she had ever known. Her eyes lingered on the distant towns and fields, imagining a life that was open and unafraid.
"You're doing well,"
Luke said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was warmth in it that made her heart swell.
"Every step you take forward is proof of your strength."
Clara looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. I didn't think I could do this," she admitted softly.
"I thought I would always be stuck, always afraid."
Luke shook his head gently.
"Fear doesn't have to control your life," he said. "You've proven that. You've taken the first steps towards something better, and that takes more courage than most people realize." But, Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. For so long, she had carried the burden of her fears alone. Now she had someone by her side who believed in her, someone who had shown her that life could be different. It was a new kind of hope, one she had not allowed herself to feel in years. The next few days were filled with small adventures and quiet discoveries.
Clara and Luke traveled through forests where sunlight dappled the ground, and through valleys where the air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers. They stopped by streams to rest and collect water, and sometimes they sat silently, listening to the world around them. Each moment brought Clara closer to a sense of peace she had never known. During one such stop, Clara decided to speak about her past, not in detail, but enough to acknowledge the fears she had carried for so long. She told Luke about the bruises, the nights of worry, and the long days spent feeling invisible. Luke listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving hers, offering only understanding and quiet support.
"You've been through a lot," he said softly when she finished, "but you're still here. You're still moving forward. That shows strength, Clara, more than most people ever have."
Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she did not feel ashamed of her past. She felt proud that she had survived, proud that she had found the courage to leave fear behind, and grateful that she no longer had to face the world alone. As they continued their journey, Clara began to notice changes in herself that went beyond the physical act of moving. She walked taller, spoke more confidently, and even laughed more freely. The fear that had once dictated her every move was now a quiet whisper, no longer in control. She found herself noticing beauty in the world around her, the colors of the sunrise, the sound of birdsong, the feel of grass beneath her hands.
Life felt larger and more meaningful than it had in years.
Luke noticed these changes too, though he never commented on them directly. He simply continued to walk beside her, offering guidance when necessary, and quietly letting her find her own strength. His trust in her abilities helped her trust herself, and that trust became a foundation for the new life she was building. One afternoon, they came upon a small village nestled between rolling hills. The village was peaceful, with children playing in the streets and neighbors chatting warmly with each other. Clara felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never allowed herself to feel truly safe around others, but the warmth of this place invited her to imagine a life where she could belong. "Do you think," she began hesitantly, "we could stay here for a while?" I think I'd like to try." Luke smiled gently. "We can stay as long as you want," he said. "This can be your new beginning, Clara. A place where you can feel safe, heal, and build the life you want." Clara's heart lifted at his words. She realized that safety was not just about escaping her past, it was about creating a future where she could thrive. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a home filled with peace, kindness, and hope. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into the village with Luke by her side. She found a small cottage to rent, simple but comfortable, with a little garden where she could plant flowers and vegetables. The villagers welcomed her with open arms, curious but kind, and she began to form friendships slowly, testing her trust in small, careful ways. Luke continued to support her, helping with chores, teaching her new skills, and offering gentle guidance when needed. He never rushed her, never demanded more than she could give, and always respected her space. His steady presence was a reminder that she could rely on others without fear, and that trust could be a source of strength rather than vulnerability. As the days turned into weeks, Clara began to notice the full extent of her transformation. She no longer hid her bruises under long sleeves. Instead, she wore her clothes freely, unashamed of the marks that once symbolized fear. She walked through the village with confidence, spoke openly with neighbors, and even laughed freely with the children who had grown fond of her. The sense of isolation that had once defined her life was gone, replaced by connection, trust, and belonging. One evening, as the sun set in a brilliant display of colors over the hills, Clara and Luke sat on a small wooden bench outside her cottage. The sky glowed with pink and gold, the air warm and filled with the sounds of life. Clara looked at Luke, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything! For showing me kindness! For walking beside me! And for helping me believe I could have a life like this!" Luke smiled, tipping his hat slightly. "You did all the hard work," he said. "I only helped you see it. The courage, the strength that was always inside you." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of relief and joy. She had survived her past, embraced her present, and now could look toward the future with hope. She knew that challenges might still come, but she also knew that she had the strength, courage, and support to face them. From that moment on, Clara's life changed in ways she had never imagined. She tended her garden with pride, laughed freely with friends, and shared her story quietly with those who needed hope. She had found safety, freedom, and the quiet joy of living on her own terms. And through it all, Luke remained a steady presence, a reminder that trust and kindness could heal wounds, and that no one had to face life alone. Years later, Clara would look back on that journey with gratitude. She remembered the fear that had once controlled her, the bruises that had symbolized pain, and the courage it had taken to leave everything behind. And she would remember Luke, not just as a companion, but as the person who had helped her discover the strength within herself, who had shown her that a life of hope and freedom was always possible, and who had walked beside her when she took her first steps toward it. Clara's story became one of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of trust. She had learned that kindness could change a life, that hope could grow in the darkest places, and that even the smallest step toward freedom could lead to a future full of possibility. And as she walked through her garden, the sun shining warmly overhead, she knew she was finally home, not just in a place, but in herself.